That's a fantastic example of the colorist and also getting to the soul of something, where with the bagpipes and the penny whistle and to create something that when we see that scene, it's impossible to imagine it any other way than the way you painted it with that score. Was that the scene you were referring to? That there was
no. I was referring to the scene where Mel Gibson gives his big speech to his troops, and the English are massing in the distance, and he's giving his army this speech, and he didn't want music there. It was all a big speech, and I thought it should have this music in it, and I wrote, it was a 12-minute sequence, and I wrote a 12-minute piece of music for it. And it was just one of those things. Mel, instantly loved it when he heard it, but never thought music would work there because it was such a long sequence. But those kind of things happen in film all the time.
Well, it's interesting because just the nature of film itself, where directors put years at a time into a particular picture, and then by doing that, actually end up not with the kind of the volume of experience that composers who work regularly and end up with, and the experience of solving scenes that you bring with you, having solved an innumerable number of sequences in films where there is a discussion as to should there be music, shouldn't there be music, what should it be. It's something that there are very few directors, if any really, that have that same sort of insight or experience that they bring in a musical sense to be able to know how best to solve those problems, perhaps.
Can I ask, are you mostly filmmakers or musicians?
Many musicians, composers? Mostly, that's what I thought.
I must say that mostly the directors I've worked with, a lot of them don't know much about music, or certainly grew up with commercial radio music and not classical music or serious music or concert music. Their whole world comes from commercial pop radio. And you meet somebody and they want you to score their film, but they have no idea how to relay to you, how to talk to you about what they want. And you really have to really rely on your own instincts, how the film speaks to you, and then try and convey those ideas to the director. In the case of somebody like some of the directors I've worked with, Mel Gibson, let's say, he's a brilliant director. He's also a brilliant actor. He's been around the business so many years. I'd already done 2 movies before Braveheart for him. And I don't quite know where Mel is these days in terms of his life now. But when we worked together on Braveheart, he didn't know a lot about music, but he left a lot to me to interpret for him. And then I would play him things, and he'd react to them. And that's very much how I work with my employers.
I would imagine the key kind of maybe turning point in that relationship with the director is if there's a consistency in them not knowing, you know, in any sort of, you know, detailed or profound way, understanding what the role of music in their film, if they have maybe the internal strength to kind of pass the reins of that to you, and then thereby giving you just their trust, or do they kind of inflict themselves on the process in other cases?
Well, it's interesting. For those of you who are composers, some of you are probably also filmmakers. Hollywood has changed a great deal in the last 15 years. It used to be that the person that I would work with was almost always the director, sometimes the producer, like with certain directors always work with producers and they're very, very, very close. But Jim Cameron and John Landau, for instance. But on other films, I only really work with the director. Now, times have changed, and now you have a director, and even if he's a strong director, you have 2 or 3 producers, and even if there are 4 of them, we're all agreeing what the music should be. You now also have the releasing company of the film and the studio involved much more creatively than it used to be. So suddenly you have 9 people you have to pay attention to and solve their problems. And one person will say, I love that part, but I hate that part. And somebody else will say, oh, I really like that, but I didn't like that, and I didn't like that. It's much more difficult now to write film music than it was even 10 years ago. It's a lot more chemistry than it seemed to used to be.
It's you know, it's something we've all seen evolve in Hollywood with almost a kind of in a lot of ways a precipitous drop of just, you know, respect on the art of it all, and that's one of the challenges to maintain I would imagine a focus on the art of it while being surrounded by the commerce from the studios and even the filmmakers themselves in some cases, depending on how strong they are within maintaining their own vision within the process.
It's just much more political to me than it used to be. It's much more difficult. The stakes are much higher now. And there are just a lot more people involved in the musical process that don't necessarily understand music, which makes it more difficult.
Well, maybe looking to a slightly earlier era, I think we have another...
Legends of the Fall,
Legends of the Fall.
maybe? Here is Legends of the Fall, please.